But first, I'd like to ask you, what would be your reaction if you knew that confidential information about your child was being accessed by people you didn't know? Let's say their medical records. How would you feel if your child was approached by a teacher or a health visitor and spoken to without your knowledge or consent? Well, it's been claimed by campaign groups that these are scenarios which parents everywhere could face if Scottish Government proposals to give every child under the age of 18 a named person go ahead. Well, let's hear from you. Do you think the role of the parent is being undermined? Is it a breach of their human rights? Does it overstep the boundary of family life? Or does it give priority to the most vulnerable kids in our society to help identify and support them? It's a lot to talk about this morning. It's going to be a good debate. 0500 92 95 00. Whether you're a parent or not, we all have a vested interest in the next generation. But what should be our priority about protecting the human rights of the parents or perhaps protecting the human rights of the child? Get in touch with us this morning. And while you are getting in touch, let's speak to Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute. Simon, good morning.
Good morning.
We'll also be speaking to Alison Todd, Chief Executive of Children First, in just a moment. Alison, good morning.
Good morning.
Simon, let me come back to you. You are part of this group of individuals who are challenging legally in the courts today this proposal or these proposals by the Scottish Government to give every child under the age of 18 a named person, someone that will look out for their interests. Why are you so fundamentally against these moves?
Well, because children already have somebody to look out for their interests, and that person is normally called mum or dad. It's a very strange idea that the state is going to appoint a kind of a co-parent to help you parent your child. It's every child is given a named person, regardless of need. There's no assessment of need, and we consider this to be very invasive. And actually, we think that it will jeopardise the important work of trying to identify children who really are at risk and trying to provide services to families that really want them. So what we're doing is we're asking the court to look at the question of whether the legislation breaches European laws on data protection and on privacy.
What do you say to a listener who has posted on our Facebook page, Paul McCusker, and he says, I know a few parents that really need good help and a role model. This is surely about protecting the child, Simon. It's about identifying the child who's at risk and helping them. Do we not do that by giving every child a named person, which would then help society try and find out those who needed that help?
Well, you used the key phrase in your introduction when you talked about giving priority to the most vulnerable children. What the named person proposal does is exactly the opposite of that. Instead of focusing attention on the most vulnerable children, it tries to focus attention on all children. You know, we're always told that identifying children who need protection is like finding a needle in a haystack. The named person legislation makes the haystack very, very much bigger.
If parents have nothing to hide, should they object to their children's medical records, for example, being read by strangers, if at least the child's interests are at the very heart of the investigation? Should a parent object to a health visitor approaching a child and talking to them without their consent?
Well, I think they do. I mean, I think parents do object to that.
If they've got nothing to hide?
Yes, because what we're talking about here is a kind of sort of government-approved parenting. I mean, you have the idea that there is one correct way of parenting children, that the politicians know what that is, and that parents who fall short of the government-approved standard or who deviate from it in any way are going to feel anxious. Parents are going to withdraw.
Okay.
I mean, parents are going to be less likely to approach agencies and ask for help if they think that, let's just say this is not about child protection. This is expressly about what they call less critical concerns. This is about well-being, which covers the whole of a child's life, education, diet, everything. And so parents are going to be reluctant to share information and to ask for help if they think that all this information is going to be fed through the named person.
Alison, let me come to you. You're Chief Executive of Children First. What we're looking at, according to Simon from the Christian Institute, is government-approved parenting.
Okay, I think that this legislation is really to protect vulnerable children. We know that in the past we have not provided enough protection, enough advice and support Additionally, we know that parents or carers often struggle to know who to go to when there is a period in their life that may be difficult. That's what the named person will provide. The named person will not be providing guardianship for every child. The named person will be coordinating and be a point of contact when children are vulnerable or when it's been identified that they need support. And I think the crucial thing to remember here is support, advice, information, looking after children is so much better when the parent's involved. And what it would be for all agencies, for education, midwives, when they're working with families, it's crucial that they work together, that they get consent, and that they agree together what decisions should be made, what support is required.
Alison, I know we're going to develop this further after the news, and I will be giving you the chance to respond in full. But I want to try and open up the phone lines because we have Fiona who joins us now from Dumfries. Fiona, we are approaching the news, but just very quickly, can I just get your views on this? Do you think that this does undermine the role of the parents at all, this legislation that we're talking about this morning?
Absolutely not. I think the word guardianship that you're using is undermining the role of the parents. Parents will always be the carers and guardians of the parents unless somebody else through a legal system has been appointed to be so. I'm a health visitor. I'm a named person for around 300 children, and I'm a source of contact for parents when they are at a time where they are requiring help. They may not require help. All parents at some point do require help. And for the children under 5, I will be the named person for them in my caseload where parents can get in touch with me and I can help them in whichever way they need help. Have you had any negative reaction from parents when you introduce yourself and say, I'm the named person? Do they look at you and say, well, what are you doing actually? No, not at all, because you're the health visitor anyway. First and foremost, you're the health visitor. You're building a relationship from day 10 when we visit, from the handover from the midwife. Where we've had most involvement recently, or with the new structure coming in, is actually through nurseries and liaising with nurseries, and that has to be good for children, where children and their families know that we are all there to work for them together. And that's been really, really positive. Really keen to get everyone's views this morning, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, perhaps you don't have children at all. Let's discuss this. Do you think that this named person legislation that we're talking about this morning, proposals being put forward by the Scottish Government, they are being challenged legally by groups who are very concerned. We'd like to get your views this morning on the role of the new named person legislation. We're talking about a very important subject. It's all over the news this morning. I know that Good Morning Scotland were covering it. We're asking, will the new named person legislation undermine the role of the parents? Looking through our Facebook page, looking on Twitter, it does look as if many of you are divided about this. Lucy Woodhouse has posted on Facebook, it will create fear and confusion for parents, particularly vulnerable ones. It's not for all parents and should only be used in very high-risk, chaotic cases. Duncan has posted on Facebook, it shouldn't create any problems if A, people actually look into what the legislation is all about and meant for, and B, folk stop scaremongering about it. Can you please explain to folk this morning that what the legislation actually means in an accurate way? Well, of course we are going to do that. Many thanks indeed for highlighting that, Duncan. We've got some real experts with us this morning. We've got Alison Todd, she's Chief Executive of Children First. Alison, good morning.
Good morning.
We also have Simon Calvert of the Christian Institute. Now, Simon, along with some other concern groups, are basically questioning these proposals. They are pushing legislation and they're testing the legislation, I should say, in our courts today, particularly along the lines of EU law. They say that this is a breach of parents' human rights. So let's get this conversation underway this morning. Let's hear from you, whether you're a parent or not. Do you think that these new proposals, this new legislation, is a breach of parents' human rights? Do you think it does breach the boundary of what is acceptable within the family? Or indeed, perhaps you think the priority is the safety of our children? And I should say that the Scottish Government have issued us with a statement this morning, and they say this legislation, including the named person service, was supported by a large majority of those who responded to the public consultation, backed by a wide range of children's charities and professionals working daily to support families across the country, and endorsed by the Parliament. As the legislation is currently the subject of a challenge in court, this is what we're talking about today, it would not be appropriate to comment further. So that's the views of the Scottish Government. Alison and Simon, feel free to chip in. This is what we do in Morning Call. I want to go to our listeners though. Moira has got in touch from Edinburgh. Moira, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. How are you viewing the proposals surrounding this legislation to give every child under the age of 18 a named person?
I think it's a disgrace. Just the very fact that it's gone through as a bill undermines the privacy and sanctity of the family in Scotland. The rest of the world is in shock at this, and so am I. I can't believe that they would put all the children under 18, every child born, without any consent. The lady before was talking about we need the parents' consent. There's no consent involved in this at all. It just happens whether you like it or not. It's a complete nanny state nightmare.
OK, nanny state nightmare, says Moira. Jerry, let's hear from you. You're on the line from Nairn. Good morning. Do you agree with Moira?
Yep, good morning, Lee. I totally agree with Moira and Simon. This, let it be stated here, this bill has little or nothing to do with child protection. What it has to do with is a secret surveillance database whereupon every child born in this country will be monitored pre-birth through their young lives to up to the age of 18, including their parents, including their grandparents. Some of the language used, some of the terminology in this bill is absolutely communistic. State guardian, corporate parent, and here's the one that really upsets me: a resistant parent. What's going to happen to these resistant parents like us? We have a 4-year-old due to go to school next year. We will not participate in this communist ideology, if you like. What's going to happen to us as parents? Are we going to be arrested? Are they going to take our son off us? Mm-hmm. There's no opt-out in this bill. There's no... this bill literally puts an end to parenthood as we know it.
OK, we opened the phone lines. Our first two callers after 9 o'clock, Moira and Jerry, both sounding very real concerns about the proposals contained in this legislation. Alison, Todd from Children First. What if parents don't want to do this? What kind of penalty are they going to face? Answer, Jerry.
I think the first thing that we need to say is that this will not come into play for parents and children who don't actually have any concerns or any issues. This is where there are concerns about a child's safety or a parent would like to have more advice or support. And the other thing that we must remember is we have legislation. We have data protection legislation. We have human rights legislation. We have a parenting strategy. People working in this field absolutely support parents and think that parents are the best people to look after and bring up their children. That's what Children First believes. OK,
Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute.
Sorry, forgive me reacting so strongly there, but really, Alison Todd, I'm afraid, simply does not understand what this legislation is about if she thinks that it's only for children where there are issues. It is expressly not about that. The named person is appointed for every child. Now, where there are known issues with children, there is, of course, existing legislation, quite a lot of existing powers for social services and others to intervene where there is suspicion that the child is being neglected or being abused. And that's obviously quite right. That's the proper role of the state, to intervene where there is evidence of something going wrong. But the named person system operates with every single child. By definition, it doesn't wait until there's any evidence of something being wrong. And I listened very carefully to what Alison said before the news in her introduction, that it required consent. And again, it most certainly does not require any consent, not for speaking to children, not for data sharing. I didn't disagree with a word that Alison said before the news, because, the idea of someone to approach and a consensual approach, we would all agree with that. But this legislation is nothing like that.
Alison, it appears to be the lack of consent that is worrying people, that this will happen regardless of whether parents want it to or not.
If there are no concerns, if there are no issues, the named person will not be looking at medical information or talking to people. This is about two things. One is to provide support, information, one point of contact and a coordinating person for parents. And the other thing that it will do is hopefully prevent or make it less likely that very vulnerable children will slip through the net. If you think of how many children there are no way that named persons are going to be able to cope. If it's for every child, it is for children where there are concerns, and it's where parents have identified concerns.
Well, that's
exactly
likely
to be the most likely incident, that it's actually a parent that needs support. we know of many parents, kinship carers, who don't know where to go to and don't actually know how to get the advice. That will mean that it's very, very clear. What I do think is important is that it doesn't have unintended consequences. So it's important that we're having this debate, but it would be terrible if we lost this legislation, which should help the most vulnerable and prevent children and young people from slipping through the net.
OK, I want to go to the phone lines. Lynn, good morning. Welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Louise.
Join in the conversation. What do you want to say?
Well, I'm a home educator. I have 4 children under the age of 12. I have twins who are under the age of 5. We have no contact with the local education authority out of choice. They have no teachers. We have no health visitor. I'd be extremely curious as to how the Scottish Government plan on appointing a named person for them.
Why do you not have a health visitor? Is it the age of the children? Is it that they're over 5 now?
Yes, the children they're under 5. They're both 4. I suppose if I had a concern, I could call a health visitor through my GP. We don't hide the fact that we home educate. My GP knows that we home educate. Our dentist knows that we home educate. The health visitor knows that we home educate. But the children have not been ill. They've had their vaccinations and they haven't had any contact with a health visitor since they were 2. So we have no regular contact with a professional out with our family. And I think that to have somebody appointed by the state to kind of look in our family and make judgments about it is completely unnecessary, a total waste of money. You don't make it easier to find the needle in the haystack by adding more hay. They should concentrate the resources on where it's required.
Are you a good parent, Lynn?
Am I a good parent? Yes.
OK, so no concerns about your children?
I have absolutely no concerns about my children, no. I'm also a lecturer, I have to say, part-time, and I do have contact with students who are under the age of 18. It's highly unlikely because I'm a part-time lecturer that I would be asked to be a named person, but I would certainly refuse. And I hope that there are many professionals out there, head teachers who are asked to do this, who will refuse.
Okay.
Their workload is already huge, and they can't possibly, with the massive schools that we have now when they've been amalgamated, they can't possibly make a judgment about who requires help.
OK, Lynn, stay with me. Alison, I want you to come back and explain to Lynn why she needs a named person for her children.
Well, I actually think it would be very unlikely that Lynn would have any more contact with professionals than she already does.
I think probably other people might be agreeing with you, but the point is, why is she being given a named person for her children?
Well,
She's just said she's a good parent.
I have a doctor and I go to the doctor when I need the doctor. Lynn doesn't know if she will ever need help. You know, I would certainly hope not, but we hear about parents who've become ill. We hear about parents who have had changes in their job situation, all sorts of reasons why they might need support, and all Lynn will know is the person that she should contact should she require more support. Should she not, then she won't need to ever get in touch and I'll probably never see her named person.
Well, can I intervene at this point?
In you come, Simon. One
of the participants in the legal action today, a family called the Macintoshes, their situation is quite similar to Lynn's, I think, in that they home educate. They have young children. They got a letter from their NHS trust. The letter said, "We have appointed a named person for your children. From now on, all of your children's medical records will be sent to your named person. And if you're late for a medical appointment, the named person will be told about that too." Now, that was how the Forth Valley NHS Trust think that the named person legislation has to be implemented. So I'm afraid that, again, I don't disagree with Alison Todd's approach. The problem is Alison Todd's approach is not reflected in the legislation. OK, let's go back to the phone line. Stella joins us now from Dundee. Stella, good morning.
Good morning, Louise.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's the biggest load of hogwash that I've ever heard. If I'd have known this was coming on today, I'm a community activist. I would have looked at all the agencies we have in Dundee. I could list over 20. We look after people here from the cradle to the grave. Every aspect of life, regardless of we don't have a named person, no, but we even have things like the firemen, if they have to go to a fire, they're trained to watch out for things, unusual with kids, with adults, with old people, antisocial people that go in, do the same. Even people like that Lynn that says she doesn't need anybody. She must take her children to clubs, for them to play among other groups. And all these professional trained people are all trained to look out for, things that are not going right in a family. And so I have this that they're planning, to me, is finally we've reached George Orwell's world. Big Brother is watching you. I think it's ridiculous what they're trying to do. As it is, I'm always shouting, there's far too many agencies, because a lot of them replicate what they're doing, a lot of them don't work together. So if they were to cut it down and put the funding into the proper way, then maybe we'd get better service. But as it is, we look after everything. I mean, as I said, I'm only a community volunteer, but I look out for things as well. So why we need this named person that's going to snoop into all your medical records? And by the way, I had 3 children of my own. I think this is the biggest load of hogwash that I've ever heard.
OK, strong words this morning from Stella and other callers. We're being told it's a nanny state, it's a communist state, it's a load of hogwash. Let's get your thoughts this morning. 0500 92 95 00. We're asking if the new named person legislation undermines the role of the parent. Even if you've never phoned the programme before, please do get in touch with us this morning, because let's face it, we all have a vested interest in the next generation. The number again, 0500 92 95 00. While you're getting in touch, let's bring in Alex Hamilton, Head of Policy for Aberlour Childcare Trust. Alex, good morning.
Good morning, Louise. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Your priority is obviously the care of children. Just tell us very briefly about the work of your trust.
Well, we work across over 40 locations in Scotland, really addressing many vulnerabilities that children face, whether that's disability, children affected by parental substance use. We care for looked after children and deal with parenting issues as well. So we've got quite a range of services across the board. OK,
what do you make of these proposals? Are you in favour of them?
Oh, absolutely. I think this actually brings a coherence to sort of making sure that every child in Scotland has the best protection possible available to them. And let's unpack some of the debates points that we've heard this morning. We hear Big Brother, the fact this is a nanny state, even the term state guardian being bandied about. If you were going to appoint a state guardian and have this kind of Big Brother role, you wouldn't choose some of the busiest people in the kind of locality to do it. And if you look, we're talking about deputy head teachers of secondary schools, often people who have several thousand children in their care. They simply aren't going to have the time to exercise the kind of level of scrutiny and that's being suggested. And as Alison says, this underlines the fact that in the vast majority of cases, most families will never have any cause to contact their named person, but they know that it is there should they need it. And everybody has the potential that at some point they could come off the rails or need some help, and the named person is there. And that's because the level of traffic or the volume of traffic will be largely one direction, and that will be parents asking advice from the named person as to how to access state support. But if it has to, if there needs to be an intervention, you've got somebody there who is putting the pieces together on a very light touch basis, but just has a weather eye on all the children, as you would hope that head teachers have already. This codifies best practice and puts that on a statutory footing to make sure that it happens across the board.
I've got 2 kids. When they were born, I was handed the wee red book by my health visitor. OK, it's the wee red book that you and your doctor, your health visitor, can work round, and their weight's added in and their vaccination details are put in and all the rest of it. And when they go to school, they then come under the care of your GP. Can I ask, what's been wrong with the system up till now?
Well, nothing, and this really doesn't replace that system. This just adds into that. It's a complementary position. In fact, if today it's apposite that we're having this discussion today, because today is the day that the government has launched its action plan on child sexual exploitation, which is a direct result of the Rotherham case. Now, one of the things that came up in Rotherham was that they said, well, just having this idea that it's everybody's job to make sure everybody's okay, it doesn't actually mean that it happens. And this just makes sure that there is is somebody, a central point.
So a named person's going to stop child abuse, are they?
Well, no. Well, they will play a vital role in that, but they're also there to perform a very important function. They're there to perform a very important function in providing a service to families who need them. And as I said, the vast majority, we're talking, 90%, 95% of families will have no cause whatsoever to contact their
Simon, just give him a second. Okay, all right. Okay, I just wanted to let him finish there. We're joined by Alex Cole-Hamilton of the Aberlour Childcare Trust, who you were just hearing there, and also Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute, as well as Alison Todd, who is in favour of these proposals, I should say. Simon, you're not. So in you come, you want to respond to Alex.
Well, I mean, look, nobody doubts Alex Hamilton's good intentions, but you can't have it both ways. I mean, either this named person, as he says, will keep a weather eye on all children and will be a way of stopping any abuse taking place, or it's impossible for them to monitor all of these children. But you can't have it both ways. I think what he's saying does raise another concern, which is the workload. Before the news, you had the caller Fiona, who is a health visitor. She says that she's the named person for 300 children. Now, if the named person is implemented in the way that Forth Valley NHS Trust envision, she will be sent confidential medical reports on up to 300 children. I mean, she will not be able to open the door to her office in the morning. There will be so much post. It just hasn't been thought through. The EIS is passing resolutions because they are concerned about the impact of this workload on their teachers. It simply has not been thought through.
This is the point, Louise, and if I may. And the workload, the size of the sort of populations of children that named people will have responsibility for underline the fact that they will not be snooping out on these children. In the vast majority of cases, families will have no contact whatsoever with the named person. That person is there to put the pieces together if information is being shared about families about whom there are concerns. But in the main, their role will be to act as a point of contact, a single point of contact, which hasn't existed before, for families to contact somebody who is known to them, and that's very important as well. You know, sometimes the realm of state services can be quite intimidating, and it would be a lot of people would prefer to speak to someone in the first instance who they know, who they see at the school gates, who can point them in the right direction. And that is it. That's the level of involvement
Simon,
that we're talking about.
Okay, I just want to read out some texts that we've had in. It's really busy this morning on this. It's certainly got you going. John's texted in. He says, I think giving a child a named person is a good idea. Half our children don't know their father, thanks to present-day morals. Margaret in Oldham Chapel's been in touch. Hi, Margaret. She says, Louise, the named person scheme is just another SNP ploy to talk themselves up. If it's for guardianship up to the age of 18, why did they let children vote at 16? The SNP wants it always. The age groups simply don't make sense. 80295 if you want to text the programme. If you want to take part, get your views on air. 0500 92 95 00. Let's go off to air. Tracy, good morning.
Good morning.
What would you like to say?
I would like to first address Miss Todd from Children First. I think before she came on the programme, she should really have gone and read the bill, because everything she said does not apply. I'm actually a registered nurse. I have 2 children. I worked in Glasgow for many years. The resources, the services that we have in place at the moment for young children, they're undersourced, they're understaffed. You have children with mental health problems being put into adult wards in hospitals and NHS. There is nothing at the moment supporting the services that are in place. It's just taking money away from the services that we have already. And there is absolutely nothing in this bill that would support my children. Who are these named people? What do they know about my children? Do they know my children's personalities and their needs? I think it's an absolute ridiculous bill.
OK, Alison, Todd, do you want to respond? I know you're not here to speak on behalf of the Scottish Government, but nevertheless, as Chief Executive of Children First, you are defending these proposals. You are in favour of them. What do you say to Tracy? She's a registered nurse. She says that the situation at the moment is undersourced, understaffed. How can we then bring in another layer of bureaucracy?
OK, well, I'm speaking on behalf of the children and families that use the services of Children First and who we speak to. This bill is not about the resourcing of other services, and there are many services, I would say, are under-resourced, particularly around mental health for children. That's not what this bill is addressing. This bill is addressing the fact that we need to make sure that it's everyone's responsibility that children are safe and protected. and the importance of parents, carers, children knowing who they should go to should they have any concerns or need additional help and advice. And secondly, it's about making sure that where there are really vulnerable children, that they don't slip through the net, that someone is looking out for them and notices when things are wrong. So I think that there's two separate things here, but this bill is about making sure everyone's responsibility. And one of the things that the named person could do is if a child was in need of mental health services, they could actually push to get that young person the help and support that they require. Now, obviously, we need to make sure the services are resourced, and that might be a different debate.
OK. Alison, thank you. I know you're staying with us. Let's go back to the phone lines. Angus joins us from Oban. Good morning, Angus.
Hi, good morning.
Welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much. No, I just like to say that I totally agree with what Simon is saying and the other people that are against this bill. We were part of the MMR litigation where autism, was the case with the MMR vaccine, and the defendants were the government. And at the time, there were great endeavours made by all the government spooks to access the medical files of the kids. And, it's not just the NHS files, it's like maybe private healthcare and such like as well. Now, there's no way it is right for the government to have access to a database if they are the defendants in a case. So, why does it make it right that, all these children's medical files should be made available to a government which is corrupt, and everybody knows it's corrupt?
Well, those are your views. OK, those are your views, your own personal views. OK, Angus, many thanks indeed. Lots of you getting in touch this morning through social media and also by email. You can, of course, email the programme Morning Call Scotland at bbc.co.uk. Mr Brown's been in touch. He says, vulnerable, neglected children already have social workers. Why do we need this nonsense? Who vouches for the named guardian, he asks. Mark Ballard on Twitter. Good morning to you, Mark. He says, on BBC Radio Scotland, the Christian Institute says we should focus on vulnerable children without the named person. How do we identify who they are? We're talking about the legal challenge that's taking place in Edinburgh today. A group of concerned individuals have come forward. They're challenging the Scottish Government's plan to appoint a named person for every child in the country under the age of 18. Now, the legal case, it's costing £50,000. It's being funded by public donations from people opposed to the plan. Well, it's a lively phone in thus far. I have to say, I think probably if we're to look at it in a set of scales, it's probably tipped against. I think people are quite concerned. People raising views, and you're entitled to yours, 0500 92 95 00. But just before we go back to the phone lines, I want to read you out an email that we've had in from Claire. She's contacted us from the island of Arran. Claire, good morning to you. It's a long one, so just bear with me, but I think it's important that we hear Claire's point of view. She says, I would like to comment to the person talking against this proposal. She says, in my early teens, I was intelligent, passionate and focused, but my world began to fall apart when I was badly bullied, wasn't understood at home, and then had one parent move abroad. I spiralled out of control, became very rebellious, manic depressive, and had great difficulties finding any adult support or advice to help me express myself or move through this difficult period. If I had had a stable adult to go to who I knew would have been neutral and a real help to me, I might not have spent the next decade in chaos and depression, having not had any sort of stable platform to build my young adulthood on. Parents cannot always understand what is going on with their children. An objective view is a potent medicine. Claire, you speak very well. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to lay out your stall and to give us a clear impression of what life was like for you. Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute, you're very much against these proposals. It helped Claire.
Well, the named person proposal didn't help her, but of course, she tells a very powerful story. And what is clear, that we're all agreed that more needs to be done to help children who are vulnerable, more needs to be done to provide services to people that want them. The problem with the named person legislation is that it's a scattergun approach. It is trying to direct services and resources at all 1 million of Scotland's children in an unfocused way. And whereas at the moment, the child protection powers cut in at the level where there is a risk of significant harm to a child, the named person powers cut in at a much lower threshold. The named person is tasked with looking after children's well-being. Now, that includes a whole range of things: education, their diet. It gets us very close to this idea of a government-approved parenting. You know, the people who support this scheme and operate within the scheme, they talk about things like the Shannari indicators. Now, I suppose that 90% of parents out there have no idea what Shannari indicators are, but the professionals who will be judging your parenting do. And this is the problem. You have this idea that the named person will be enforcing a kind of government-approved scheme for what makes good parenting. And if, like these homeschooling parents or parents who just take a slightly different approach
Simon,
to
we're
life,
hearing a lot about the parents this morning, but what do you say to Claire? I know you're absolutely right. Yes, this legislation didn't help her. She's speaking retrospectively, but nevertheless, there might be another Claire out there this morning whose life might be dramatically turned round and helped and supported by this legislation. So what do you say to the Claires out there this morning who do need extra help and support?
I would say, ask a teacher. I would say, ask an adult whom you trust. If there is not somebody in your family who you can speak to, then speak to an adult who you trust. Speak to your GP. Speak to somebody that you have dealings with, who you've come to trust. And a lot of people will have stories to tell of how having a conversation with a guidance teacher, with a GP, with a minister of religion at just the right time in their lives has helped them. And it's a tragedy that Claire did not have anybody around her. And I think that perhaps this speaks to the wider issue of how we as individuals look out for one another. Perhaps it speaks to the wider issues of how we as a society, whether we take sufficient interest in our neighbours, not in a prying, nosy way, but just in a helpful way. But I don't think that there's any sense in which we could guarantee that the named person would have been able to help someone like Claire, because the named person is responsible for hundreds, potentially thousands of children. How are they ever going to find the time to identify the Claires?
Simon, I know you have to leave us now. Many thanks indeed for your contribution. I want to go back to the phone lines. Rosalind is on the line from Ayr. Rosalind, you're live on the radio. Good morning.
Morning, Louise. I'm in agreement with this legislation. I think this named person is a good idea. And for the simple reason that are children and families out there who just do not have family support, who do not have somebody that they can speak to, that might be all it needs, is somebody to speak to. The vast majority of children have that support, have no real big issues, can turn to each other for help. But there are a section of society, unfortunately, who do not have that support. So having a named person would help them get more support, help them get the support that they need. Now, I've worked in social work. I was a panel member for 12 years. So I know that I'm not talking off the top of my head. And there are children who slip through the net. And maybe having a named person would stop that child slipping through the net. And if you stop one child slipping through the net, then maybe it'll work.
OK, lots of you getting in touch. Many thanks indeed, Rosalind. Charlie in Dunoon has texted in, if this saves one child, it is worth it. Alan in Hamilton texted in as well this morning on 80295. He says, I would seriously question anyone who objected to the well-being of children being made a priority. Safeguarding always trumps data protection, and rightly so. Let's get your views on that. 0500 92 95 00. Who should we give priority to? The human rights of parents, the human rights of children. Let's go to Oliver. He's on the line from Glasgow. Good morning, Oliver.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I'm a father of a 3-year-old son. I'm a good parent. We're both good parents, and I don't believe that we would be using this or using much of the service or having much contact with the named person if we are ever given a named person and when we were given a named person. But my concern is the trust. How can I trust somebody to this named person to look after or highlight or escalate any welfare problems with my child? Certainly, we're not in a more vulnerable situation, but for what they're trying to tackle is more sieve out the people who are in more vulnerable positions. And my concern is with the highlighting the recent news on the Rotherham child abuse scandal. That certainly let a lot through the net. So I'm more worried about how can we trust that this won't happen the same way, considering these professionals who are the named person have hundreds or thousands of children to look after.
Okay.
And another point, the second point is, how can we trust these people? Like you said, who vetted for these people, considering the recent news on, historic news on people that we trust, like priests, have molested, children. These named people have the opportunity to sieve out these vulnerable people, so they have access to these very vulnerable people that don't have anybody to talk to, and they have this opportunity. You're almost opening a door to these people. Another recent case about doctors who had access to over 800 who could have sexually abused 800 of his clients.
Okay, so you have...
There's a trust issue.
You and your partner have got fundamental concerns over the issue of trust. That's one point you've highlighted, Oliver.
Yeah.
Thanks for your call. I want to move on. We've got lots of people to get through. Sheena, Oliver's got a fundamental problem with the issue of trust. Do you have concerns?
I don't have concerns of trust of the person. I was looking at it more. I was widowed in 1973, and with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And because, although I've got family, I didn't have any immediate family in the area I lived. And I was never able to get any help and guidance. And I would have liked somebody that I could have asked to help or guide me. I'm still very emotional about it because I think I made a lot of errors.
Well, maybe you're being a wee bit hard on yourself.
Maybe. But it would be nice to be able to have a help.
Did you turn to your GP or a health visitor at the time?
No, because I didn't think of a GP to help with problems with the children. One child was suffering a lot because she knew she was very close to her father. My other child was only 4, and he hadn't really got a close bond with his father. He adored his father.
Okay.
Now, when I eventually told them that their father had died, the little boy, he just wanted to go out and play, and he didn't cry. Whereas his sister, she cried, and she spent the next 2 years tormenting him until he cried because he didn't cry when Daddy died.
Okay.
And if only I could have had some help then. It would have helped me.
I know. Sheena...
do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Is that it's not necessary somebody for each child, but maybe for families where there is a single parent, whether they're widowed, divorced or what, where it is very difficult when you're responsible 24 hours, for the children.
Sheena, you've spoken very eloquently this morning. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your story with us. You take care of yourself. That was Sheena on the line from Dundee. Let's stay in Dundee, actually. Linda would like to join in the conversation. Linda, good morning.
Hi there.
Good morning. Thanks very much indeed for getting in touch with the programme. A range of views this morning, very poignant there. Sheena speaking and explaining just why she could really have benefited from this at a very bad time in her life. What are your views on the proposals for the named person for every child under the age of 18?
I kind of come from quite a different perspective in that I have an 8-year-old daughter who's got some very complex medical needs, and they span over 3 or 4 different hospitals in Scotland and quite a number of consultants and specialists. Even my daughter's GP won't get involved in how we look after her because there are so many people. Bringing in this kind of named person, how are they going to be competent? And I'm not happy with the fact that they would have access to all her records. They may make assumptions that she misses so much school. They don't understand how she copes and how we get through all our medical issues, and I'm absolutely 100% against it.
OK, 100% against it is Linda in Dundee. Let's get the views of Yvonne in Edinburgh. Yvonne, good morning.
Oh, hello, good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome. What are your concerns?
Well, first of all, I don't agree with it. I think it's a waste of money. And I'm also trying to find out just how much all this is going to cost when we've got councils strapped for cash. Everybody's in the government everywhere, they're all talking about how little money we have. And the other thing is, as some callers before me brought up, is the problem of who this named person is. And now I find that the named person is going to have many, many, many children that they are going to be responsible for, which is quite problematic. And how will they know them? Will they know them as well as their parents do? I mean, it just is like a plaster on a big cut. I'm sorry, I really don't think this has been thought out. It's just, oh well, let's do this and everything will be fine.
Yvonne, thank you for your call. I want to bring in Alex Hamilton again from Aberlour Childcare Trust. A range of views this morning. Everyone from Stella, who said she really could have done with some help in her early years looking after her children at a very difficult time, right through to those who are questioning the issues of trust and how much it costs. Have you actually seen a pilot project underway? Have you actually seen these proposals work anywhere?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because the last time that I was on your show was about 6 months ago, and we had a range of callers coming in from Highland, where there's actually been a pilot over a number of years there to roll out exactly this, the named person proposals. And the calls were either universally positive, or those who weren't positive about it just weren't even aware that it was happening. And I think that speaks to the fact that most families will never have any cause to get in touch with their named person. But if, in the very emotional example that we heard from Sheena, that a tragedy happens and they start to come apart as a family, that there is somebody that they can go to who will most likely be known to them as a head teacher at the school, then they can approach that person and be directed to the various avenues of state support that they wouldn't know where to start looking were they on their own. So I think if you listen to Simon and his arguments about this fact that these people are going to be marching through communities, keeping an eye on every single family, you'd be forgiven for thinking that every named person would be handed a detective kit and told to start raking through bins. These are very busy people, but they have a caring job already. They have responsibility for children already. Mm-hmm. They've been through all the proper checks in terms of protection of vulnerable groups, scheme membership, so they're absolutely accredited in terms of their suitability to work with children. And they have the skills and the understanding of where the avenues of support lie, so that any family that does come up against a crisis can access that support.
OK, many thanks indeed, Alex Hamilton there from Aberlour Childcare Trust. Lots of you getting in touch. Let me just whiz through some of these. I maybe have to just sub them back a wee bit because of time. Lorraine has emailed the programme. She says, hell would freeze over before I would stand for a government-appointed named person with authority for my child. I support the SNP and I'm a member of the party, but this is a step too far. And B has also texted in, as a foster carer, I'm in favour of anything that identifies any child potentially at risk. I've seen too many kids who have not had good early years.